My name is Noelle Hart Avery, and I'm 36 years old. I read airflow and amperage for a living, owner of a small heating and cooling outfit on the west side of Cincinnati. My days smell like sheet metal and Freon. I like work that hums when it's honest. A compressor lies only when it's dying. People are trickier. Marco zipped his carry-on 3 weeks ago and said he needed the trip to clear his head. Chicago. Client strategy session. He kissed my forehead, then held my gaze half a second too long, like he was trying to confirm I still believed him. I was on a step stool, coaxing a stubborn filter into the bedroom air handler, thinking, "You mostly work remote. What exactly needs clearing?" I let it go. Love has muscle memory. Mine reached for patience. The first hairline crack arrived quiet. A gas station charge in Columbus on a Wednesday morning, he was in Dallas. Another Tuesday night, he texted me. Meeting ran late. Our shared location put his phone parked outside our house at 4:07 p.m. When I mentioned it over dinner, he smiled with that airy, dismissive charm he keeps for parking tickets and promises. "Noelle, you're spiraling. Focus on your business. Isn't summer your busy season?" I told myself not to be paranoid. I told myself tired people misremember. I told myself the simplest story. Marco is worn thin, and when people are stretched, they fray. Stories are cheap, verification costs. 2 weeks later, the money noticed first. Our joint savings, only for repairs and emergencies, was short $5,000. When I asked, he called it necessary equipment. New laptop, specialized software he could write off. Odd, since he'd just bought a laptop 6 months earlier. He shrugged. Creative work moves fast. The way he said creative made it sound like a country I didn't have a passport for. That Friday, he canceled Chicago again. Client emergency, rescheduling soon. I felt a mean little relief bloom in my chest. Maybe we'd finally breathe in the same room for a weekend. But later that night, paying invoices on our shared desktop, I saw the proof pretending to be proof. An email confirmation for a Southwest flight under his name. The seat wasn't canceled. It was transferred. I stared 11 minutes, long enough for the screensaver to float across his name. Transfer to who? I called Jonas, my contracts guy. Jonas speaks in right angles. If you want out of the fog, get a lighthouse, hire a PI. He texted me a name, Dana Cross. One of our clients had used her during a frothy separation that ended like a slow-moving car crash. I called Dana Monday, between job sites. The phone cradled against my shoulder while I wiped coil dust from my hands. Her voice carried the cadence of someone who had already survived a war I couldn't name. "What do you need to know, Noelle?" "Where my boyfriend is actually going when he says Chicago, and why my money feels lighter." She didn't flinch. "I'll track for a month. Photos, location logs. You'll get timestamps that stand up to questions." I sent the retainer from the front seat of my service truck, the same seat I nap in between July emergency calls. The first photos arrived a week later. I opened them under the wash of the kitchen stove light, because I didn't want to turn on the big light and make it real. Marco in an airport parking garage. He's talking to a man in khakis and a polo, average build. The next frame, Marco holds a boarding pass. In the background, the gate signage blurs, but not enough. I looked it up. That gate doesn't fly to Chicago. It flies to Louisville. My stomach did the merciless math. Chicago to Columbus to Louisville, and a gas charge that didn't fit. I could put the pieces together, but the picture refused to snap. Cheating? With who? Why Louisville? I didn't confront him. Clarity works better cold. Over 3 days, I opened a new checking account, moved half the joint savings, and removed my name from a barely used joint credit card. I paid the minimum on it anyway to keep my own credit unbruised. I changed a few passwords he never asked for. Survival is a skill you practice privately. Thursday afternoon, he came home early and saw the bank alert open on my laptop. His face drained clean. "You moved the money. Are you spying on me now?" "Are you lying to me?" I asked. He didn't answer. He set the laptop down carefully, like it contained a delicate animal, grabbed his keys, and said he'd be at Evelyn's for a few days. His sister has always been the stable one. Band-aid tone, nurse hands. He closed the door like it might bruise. I sat on the sofa in the hum of the air handler I'd serviced myself, listening to our house breathe. The silence felt like a room we'd never decorated because we swore we'd get to it later. That night I called Dana. "I need everything you have." She paused. Are you certain you want this right now? Because something is off in a way that won't match the story you're writing. Send it, I said. The phone made my voice sound like a stranger. 20 minutes later, a zipped folder of photos, a document labeled Bank Summary, and a note in bold across the top. Before you look, he isn't sleeping with her. I opened the photos first. Marco at the airport again, but he isn't heading towards security. He's near baggage claim, handing the polo and khakis man a manila envelope. Another shot from a hotel lobby. Marco alone, laptop open, head bowed, the posture of a man doing penance or math. And then the one that felt like a slap from someone I loved. Marco stepping out of his car in a casino parking garage in Indiana, a backpack slung over his shoulder. The timestamp, a Wednesday afternoon he had sworn he'd been on a marathon client call. I opened the bank document with the care of a bomb tech. It wasn't our joint accounts. It was a stitched-together summary from public records, credit pulls, the paper crumbs we all shed when we stand too close to the edge. 4 credit cards I'd never heard of. Balances between $8,000 and $23,000. Total, just over $60,000. My throat closed. I didn't know whether to throw up, scream, or laugh at how loudly denial hums until you shut off the breaker. The next email explained the man in khakis. Richard Tomlinson, debt relief consultant. The airport meetings were handoffs, not rendezvous. The plane confirmations were often fake, generated with a friend's rewards account to look legitimate if I peeked. The business trips were mapped with a gambler's logic. Louisville and southern Indiana, proximity to gaming floors and ATMs. I closed the laptop and set it beside the stove. The house didn't change shape, but I swear the corners felt sharper. I drove to Evelyn's the next morning with a folder of printed photos and the debt summary tucked like bad x-rays under my arm. Evelyn made coffee and didn't try to smile. When I laid everything out on her kitchen table, she pressed her fingers to her eyes. Our father, she said finally. He lost the house when Marco was 16. We swore, both of us, that we'd never live like that again. Sometimes a revelation isn't new information. It's just the moment you connect it to your life. I left Evelyn and drove straight to the bank. I moved the rest of the joint savings, locked down shared access, changed more passwords. It felt cruel and correct at once. You can love a drowning person without handing them your lungs. Just after midnight, the front door clicked. Marco stood in the doorway, thinner than last month. He stepped into the living room where I sat without the lights on, the blue of the router blinking like a pulse. It's not what you think, he said. I reached for the lamp and turned it on. He winced. It never is, I told him. You didn't cheat on me. You gambled us. He folded onto the edge of the couch, hands shaking, the way machinery trembles right before it seizes. Words poured out, small bets that grew teeth. Online blackjack at 2 a.m., one credit card feeding the minimums on another. Promises to quit, strategies to win it back. Shame turning into scaffolding around lies. I listened. I didn't interrupt. When he ran out of language, the room filled with the low, steady breath of the air handler. I said, You risked everything we built for something you can't hold in your hands. He asked for another chance. Therapy, GA meetings, total transparency, passwords, monitoring. Whatever it takes. I wanted honesty, I said, not management. The words surprised me with how ready they'd been, sitting in my mouth for weeks. The next day, I put gas in his car and drove him to Evelyn's. We didn't talk on the way. The road unrolled like a list of repairs I could not make for him. Back home, I stood in the kitchen and ran the water until it went cold. I thought about compressors and coils and the music of machines that tell you the truth even when it's ugly. I thought about love as a system and what happens when someone steals air from the room. The phone lit. A new email from Dana. One line at the top in bold. Again, as if she knew I'd need the reminder. He isn't sleeping with her. Worse, I thought. He's sleeping with the odds. Morning found me in the kitchen, with the folder still on the table, coffee cooling by degrees that felt measurable. Numbers have a way of sitting in the room even when you shut the laptop. 4 cards, balances between 8 and 23, total just over 60. They didn't shout, they just tilted the floor. I called Dana first. She picked up on the second ring like people do when they don't sleep much. I have your summary, I said. I need the corners squared. She walked me through the pattern with a paramedic's calm. He uses small withdrawals to test limits. The days he says he's flying, he isn't. Those confirmation emails are real in the way a stage set is real. The rewards account they come from belongs to a friend, not Marco. Why the airport at all? I asked. Noise. Anonymity. It looks normal from the outside. And the man in khakis, Richard? Richard Tomlinson, debt relief consultant. He mediates with creditors, sometimes tells clients which bills to let die. They meet at airports and hotel lobbies because his office is his car. I wrote it down even though I already knew I'd remember. There's a particular clarity that descends once denial leaves the building. It isn't kind, but it is clean. After we hung up, I texted Evelyn. Coffee again? I'll bring the folder. She replied, come. Her apartment is the practical kind. Lamps that don't pretend to be anything. A couch that forgives. She opened the door with the expression I recognize from families in waiting rooms. Braced. I laid out the photos and the typed summary in order, like I was presenting an autopsy to someone who had loved the body. When she reached the casino photo, she put a knuckle against her mouth. He always said the sound bothered him, she whispered. Dad loved it. Marco hated it. I watched the memory rearrange itself in her face. How a younger brother's hate was never about the clatter of slots. It was about the fact that the sound could carry your house away on its back. Evelyn's voice frayed. He was 16 when Dad lost the mortgage. I found him in the garage that night, counting loose change, telling me we could fix it if we got enough. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it in all directions. We sat with the quiet long enough to hear the refrigerator cycle. Finally, she said, You're doing the right things. I feel like a villain who reads manuals. She shook her head. You're building a firewall. Some of us set fires when we panic. You install doors that close. I left with a new kind of grief. Not the cinematic kind that throws dishes, the boring kind that makes lists. At home, I moved from list to list as if they were stepping stones across a river. I called the bank again, locked the joint card, set text alerts to ping me at the slightest ripple. I set up account audits on Sundays, recurring calendar event, 8 p.m., honesty check. I changed passwords, and the two-factor prompts lined up on my phone like soldiers. I put a freeze on my credit. I opened a separate checking account dedicated to the business and routed invoices there. It felt clinical. It felt mean. It felt like oxygen. Marco texted from Evelyn's that evening. I'm starting therapy, GA meetings. I'll give you passwords. I'll do it all. I stared at the little gray bubble until it stopped pretending to type. Then I typed and erased 3 different responses before settling on the only one that didn't lie. Go to the meetings whether I see the passwords or not. He called then, voice stripped raw, words tumbling. I kept thinking I could win it back before you noticed. That's the part that breaks me, not the losing, the not noticing. I thought if I could get ahead of the math, the shame would stop sprinting. You were sprinting with it, I said. He told me how it started in the shutdown years. At first, it was fantasy football buy-ins that felt like side quests in a life paused on the loading screen. He won once, and the sound it made in his head was the same sound as relief. Then online blackjack, small hits, small losses, then coverage shifts. One card to pay the minimum on another. The slow migration from browser tabs to actual rooms with carpets designed to look like you're moving even when you're standing still. I was so sure I could quit, he said, the words soft and stubborn. Every night I said, this is the last one, and every morning I woke up deeper. You built an entire second life in the space between those sentences, I said, and heard how tired I sounded. You didn't let me choose with you. He cried, and I didn't go to him. Love doesn't disappear in a single lie, but it changes shape after 1,000 small ones. Mine now had edges I could cut myself on. That weekend, Evelyn drove with him to his first GA meeting. She sent me a thumbs-up emoji that felt both too small and exactly right. Marco texted afterward. There were people who told the truth out loud. It hurt and helped. Then a picture of a pamphlet with the 12 steps like a staircase. I looked at it too long, wanting something from it I wasn't entitled to. Night was the hardest, so I gave it chores. I cooked without recipes. I rearranged the living room, chair by the window, couch angled to face the doorway instead of the television. I pulled the air handler cover and changed the filter even though it had weeks left in it. I built a spreadsheet with tabs. Accounts, green. Vulnerabilities, yellow. Unknowns, red. I entered Richard Tomlinson into a column labeled Attachments and set a reminder to ask Dana what consultant really buys when you're drowning. On Monday, I met with Patricia Moreno, the family law attorney Jonas had recommended just to understand the map, I told myself, a sentence that tried to sound neutral and failed. Her office was framed degrees and a single plant that looked like it would survive the apocalypse. Patricia spoke in full paragraphs with no wasted syllables. I told her the truth because lying to someone who knows the math is a special kind of foolish. You don't need to decide everything today, she said, sliding a legal pad toward me. But you do need to protect your credit and your business now. If his debt is in his name, good. Keep it that way. Do not co-sign consolidation or bankruptcy. Draft a separation agreement ready to file if the wind shifts. You can love someone and still sign papers that guard your life. I already moved the money and tightened accounts, I said, half defiant, half child. She gave a small smile. Then you're ahead of the worst day. I walked out feeling both steadied and skinned. The elevator ride down was a slide into a version of myself I hadn't wanted to meet, the woman who learns to catalog betrayal like inventory. At the lobby, my phone buzzed. A message from Dana. Small thing you should know, she'd written. The reason I take cases like yours. My husband died 6 years ago. Gambling. It makes me obsessive about the breadcrumb trails. You're doing more right than you think. I stared at the words until the elevator doors closed again behind someone else. There's a tenderness in strangers telling you you're not insane. I drove to a job site and crawled into an attic so hot the light felt heavy. By habit, I worked the checklist. Cut power, remove panel, inspect wiring, test capacitor. The system had been short-cycling, telling one story to the homeowner and another to the tools. Machines don't gaslight. They just fail where you can see if you're willing to look. I replaced the capacitor and listened to the condenser settle into an honest hum. On the way back down the ladder, I laughed once, sharp and joyless, at the metaphor writing itself without my permission. That night, Marco called from Evelyn's again. His voice had that damp hope I've learned to be wary of. I talked to Richard about a plan. He says we can negotiate some of the balances down. He wants to meet at the airport Wednesday. Not here, I said immediately. No meetings anywhere near me, my home, or my accounts. Your debt lives in your address now. He was quiet a long time. You're different, he said finally. I'm not different, I answered. I'm calibrated. Will you come with me to one meeting, just to see? I closed my eyes. The part of me that wants to rescue wears my mother's voice. The part of me that wants to survive wears mine. Not yet, I said. Maybe not at all. Your recovery cannot borrow my presence as collateral. I could hear him nodding, the way people do when they have to pretend to accept a boundary. I get it, he said, and didn't. When we hung up, I opened my spreadsheet and added a new tab, non-negotiables. I typed without looking at my hands. No access to joint funds. No new shared debt. No secrecy framed as protection. No fixing the story for him. No revenge, even when invited. Choose distance. I printed it and taped it inside the kitchen cabinet with the spices. Petty or practical, I couldn't tell. Maybe both. The days that followed arranged themselves into a pattern. Work, audit, sleep, repeat. Marco texted proof-of-life photos, folding chairs in church basements, a whiteboard with dates, a coffee cup ringed onto an attendance sheet. He asked for nothing and everything at once. On Thursday afternoon, I was eating a sandwich over the sink, too tired to own a plate, when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I answered because I answer everything now. Ms. Avery? A careful voice asked. This is the Fraud Investigations Department with your bank. We're calling to verify a signature on a credit card application from 14 months ago. My teeth touched the bread. I haven't applied for any credit in 2 years. A pause. Keys tapping. We suspected as much. We'll email the document. Please confirm whether the signature is yours. I opened the attachment on my laptop with the reverence of someone diffusing dynamite. There it was. My name in ink that looked like mine, if you'd only ever seen it from across a room. The capital N in Noel two-rounded, the Avery missing the tiny hitch my hand makes before the V, close enough to pass a glance, wrong enough to ring every bell inside me. I pressed my forefinger against the screen like I could smudge away what it meant. There are betrayals that stab. This one wrote. The bank rep returned to the line. We can flag this as identity fraud and proceed with investigation. If you'd like to press charges, given the documentation, you would likely... Please flag and protect the account, I said, my voice more even than I felt. I'll decide the rest after I can breathe. Of course, she said gently. We'll lock this down on our end. After I hung up, I stood very still in my quiet kitchen. The air handler kicked on and sent a clean line of air across my face. I thought of that night in the living room, Marco asking for another chance, offering passwords like flowers. Passwords are a management plan. Forging a signature is a rewrite of who I am. I picked up my keys, grabbed the folder, and headed to Patricia's office because some doors you only learn to close by closing them. On the way, a text blinked from Marco. I found a meeting near your side of town. Maybe we could... I powered the phone off. In the elevator, I caught my reflection. Tired, older by a season, eyes steady. There's a face you get when the floor stops tilting. I didn't recognize mine, but I trusted it. Patricia didn't even look surprised when I walked into her office without an appointment. Maybe she recognized the kind of stillness I was carrying, the kind that only comes when a person has run out of panic. Let me guess, she said, standing to close the door. It got worse. I slid the printed application across her desk. My name in forged ink looked polite, almost considerate, the kind of fake that asks you not to make a scene. She adjusted her glasses, studied it, then looked up. That's not yours. No, I said. But the bank thinks it is, or did. Patricia's voice didn't rise. You could press charges. This is textbook identity fraud, Ms. Avery. Signature replication, unauthorized debt, potential liability exposure. Do you want to? The question felt too large for the air. I looked at the clock on her wall, a slow second hand circling like a metronome. No, not yet. I just want protection. Then we file for legal separation immediately, she said. You need a formal boundary between your finances and his. If you stay tied together on paper, a judge could still interpret future liabilities as shared. She began dictating to her assistant through the door. Draft separation paperwork, financial carve-out, immediate asset freeze on joint accounts. Include truck title and business holdings. I'll handle the mortgage, I told her, voice flat. But his debt stays with him. I'm not co-signing, not consolidating, not bailing him out. Patricia nodded once. That's the right sentence, even if it hurts. When I got home, I drafted my own version of the truth. It wasn't poetic, just practical. I wrote down what I was willing to carry and what I refused to drag. I emailed the document to Evelyn, asking her to share it with Marco, since he'd stopped answering my calls. He replied 3 hours later, in bursts. Marco, you're really doing this? Marco, you're abandoning me when I'm trying to get help? Marco, you humiliated me, Noelle. I stared at the screen before typing what I actually meant. Me. No, Marco. The truth did. He didn't respond. A week later, Evelyn called. I could hear the weight in her breathing before she spoke. He's devastated, she said quietly. He feels like you've cut him off when he's finally getting better. I pressed my forehead against the cold window. Evelyn, he stole my name. I didn't cut him off. I just stopped handing him the scissors. Silence. Then a sigh. I know. I do. I just wish it didn't have to feel like watching two people drown on different shores. We said goodbye, but neither of us hung up right away. The static hummed, filling in what words couldn't. By the end of that week, things got worse, again. It always amazed me how trouble could find new corners to hide in, even after you've emptied every drawer. A call from Marco's employer came first. The woman introduced herself as Leah from HR. Polite, nervous. She explained they were conducting a routine credit review for employees managing client budgets. His report had triggered flags, recent bankruptcies, fraud inquiries. We're placing him on unpaid leave pending an ethics review, she said carefully. We thought you should know, given the shared address on file. Not for long, I said. My voice sounded like someone else's. Not for long at all. That night, my phone buzzed again. Marco, you did this. Marco, you told them. You made me look like a criminal. I wanted to throw the phone across the room, but instead I sat at the kitchen table and typed slowly, deliberately. Me. I didn't humiliate you. The truth did, remember? He left it on red. I wish I could say that was the breaking point, that something inside me snapped clean. But it wasn't a snap. It was a quiet settling, like dust after demolition. The next morning I called Dana. She answered with that calm tone I'd come to rely on. I wondered if you'd call, she said. How are you holding up? Functional, I said, which is more than I can say for him. She hesitated. Do you want my opinion? I wouldn't be calling otherwise. You're doing what survivors do, she said. You're protecting the walls first. My husband didn't. When his debts came out, I thought honesty would fix it. I was wrong. You're not. That stopped me. You told me once you took this case because of him. I did. He hid his gambling until the day collectors came to the door. I kept saying we can fix this until I realized we wasn't real anymore. Her voice softened. I see the same impulse in you, Noelle. Don't confuse compassion for currency. The line went quiet. I didn't realize I was crying until she said, You're allowed to grieve someone who's still breathing. 3 days later, I met with Patricia again to sign the separation draft. The pages smelled faintly of ink and resolve. When the pen touched paper, my hand didn't tremble. There's a strange relief in bureaucratic heartbreak, signatures that mean survival instead of promises. Patricia looked over the final page. You're officially protected, she said. His financial storms can't reach your business now. What happens next? You wait, she said. Sometimes that's the hardest legal strategy. The waiting was the worst part, the kind that hums between midnight and dawn. I filled it with routine. Invoices, service calls, Sunday honesty checks. I kept my business afloat while my personal life sank, somewhere I couldn't reach. Evelyn texted occasionally with updates I didn't ask for. He's attending meetings twice a week. He's meeting with a therapist. He still talks about you like you're the only person who saw him clearly. I'd read them, then set my phone face down. Seeing him clearly didn't mean I could save him. By the start of spring, I thought the worst might finally be behind me. I was wrong again. Marco's company made their review public. Employees found out, gossip spread, and by the end of the week, he was officially terminated. The same day, a notice arrived from the bank confirming the fraud case had closed. They'd verified it was his handwriting on the altered documents. I stared at the letter, my own name typed neatly at the top. The irony of being cleared of a crime someone else committed using my name didn't escape me. That night, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine and thought about how love erodes. Not like a flood, but like a slow leak you only hear once the room's already warped. I told myself I didn't need revenge. I just needed to stay dry. When the sun went down, I locked the door, shut off the porch light, and said out loud, to no one, distance is the only thing that holds. 6 months later, the world had rearranged itself into something resembling order. Not peace exactly, but a version of quiet that didn't ask for explanations. The legal separation was finalized in early spring. Patricia handed me the stamped decree like a certificate of survival. Marco hadn't contested a single term. He took full responsibility for his debt. I kept the house, the mortgage, and whatever was left of my sanity. He moved out of Evelyn's apartment and into a small unit near downtown. I knew that only because Evelyn mentioned it in passing. He's working part-time at a nonprofit, trying to rebuild. I thanked her and changed the subject. Some updates are better left unopened. Still, I thought about him sometimes, how shame can sound like progress if you whisper it slow enough. My business, Heart Heating and Air, was doing better than ever. I hired another technician, took on 3 new commercial contracts, and started sleeping through the night again. I wasn't chasing clients or answers anymore, but routine can become a religion. Every Sunday night, I sat at my dining table with a mug of peppermint tea and opened every bank statement, every account, every card. I'd scroll line by line, checking timestamps and amounts. It wasn't paranoia, it was proof of life. I called them my honesty checks. Dana had smiled when I told her that during one of our follow-up calls. You're building what we call a firewall of clarity, she said. Most people burn down their house before realizing they can just close the door. She was right. I had stopped reacting like a wounded person and started living like a cautious one. One evening, around month 5, I got an unexpected email from Dana. Subject, just checking in. Noelle, I thought about you today while working another case. Woman found out her husband had hidden 3 bank accounts. She handled it with fire. You handled yours with structure. Don't underestimate the difference. D. I stared at the message for a long time. The difference between fire and structure. One destroys, the other contains. That night, I deleted Marco's contact from my phone. The number stayed in muscle memory, but not on the screen. A few weeks later, a text arrived from Evelyn. He's been going to GA meetings regularly. 5 months clean, he says. Wants you to know that. I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, just preservation. Some messages don't need replies, they just need boundaries. But I couldn't stop wondering what his recovery looked like. Whether he still sat in back rooms with bad coffee, confessing to strangers because they were safer than the person who used to love him. There was a part of me that wanted to drive by that downtown apartment just to see if the lights were on. Another part that wanted to keep every mile between us intact. I listened to the second one. Therapy helped, though I resisted it at first. The sessions started because Patricia insisted I untangle emotional debt as carefully as financial debt. The therapist, Dr. Claire Benton, asked questions that landed harder than I expected. When did you first start managing more than your half of the relationship? Probably the second time I covered his rent just for a week. And how did that make you feel? Useful, I said, then quieter. Powerful. Claire nodded. That's the danger. Care can disguise itself as control. The moment you start playing both roles, love turns into accounting. She was right. Somewhere between balancing his overdrafts and rewriting his excuses, I'd started measuring love in liabilities. By midsummer, the air smelled like possibility again. My technician, Aaron, joked that I worked like someone trying to outrun something invisible. Maybe I was. Work became my therapy. Wiring was honest. Vents never lied. Then, one Friday afternoon, while checking invoices, I found an envelope on my doorstep. No return address. Just my name in handwriting that used to sign birthday cards and grocery lists. Inside, a note. Noelle, you could have ruined me. You didn't. I think about that every day. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just hope you're okay. Marco. I stood in the doorway with that note in my hand and the cicadas humming like white noise around me. For the first time in months, my knees felt unsteady. Forgiveness wasn't the word, but closure, maybe. That night, I made a new entry in my spreadsheet, the same one that once tracked vulnerabilities and passwords. Tab, lessons. Love is not an audit you can balance. Compassion without boundaries is self-erasure. Revenge costs more than the debt itself. Distance is proof of dignity. I saved the file and backed it up twice. When I shut my laptop, I realized the house no longer sounded empty. It sounded mine. Weeks later, I ran into Dana at a supply store of all places. She was picking up filters. Her laugh was low and familiar. Still doing your honesty checks? She asked. Every Sunday. Good, she said. Because people like us, we don't need revenge. We need routine. That night, I thought about the way she said people like us. Not as victims, but as witnesses. The ones who learned to trust silence again. And for the first time in a year, I slept through the night without the hum of the air handler to drown my thoughts. It was a Saturday morning in late August when the doorbell rang. Soft, hesitant, like it was testing whether it still had permission to sound. I wasn't expecting anyone. The air outside shimmered with the kind of humidity that makes even memory feel heavy. I wiped the sweat from my wrist, crossed the living room, and opened the door. Marco stood there, thinner, paler, his once careless hair now shorter, neater, a detail that almost hurt more than the weight loss. He held a manila folder like an apology that needed paperwork. Hey, he said. It had been 6 months since the decree. I hadn't heard his voice in any of them. Hi. He handed me the folder. I came to return this. Inside was the title to my truck, the one we'd refinanced together years ago. I'd forgotten it was still under his name. I should have transferred it back sooner, he said. It just took me a while to face the forms. The irony nearly made me laugh. All the forms he forged so easily once, and this, the honest one, was the hardest. Thank you, I said instead. He nodded, shifting his weight. Can we talk for a minute? Just talk. I hesitated. The air between us felt like a door cracked, just wide enough for ghosts to slip through. But curiosity is its own gravity. 5 minutes, I said. We sat in the living room. The furniture was different now. Lighter colors, fewer memories. Even the air handler hummed differently since I'd upgraded it in spring. The house didn't sound like ours anymore. It sounded calibrated. He looked around, eyes catching on the empty wall where our old photo used to hang. You repainted. Needed a change, I said. He nodded slowly, gaze fixed on the wall as if he could still see the outline of us. I've been in therapy. 5 months. I haven't gambled since March. I said nothing. He went on, words deliberate, like they'd been rehearsed, but still trembled on the way out. My therapist makes me write things I can't say out loud. So I started listing reasons. Why I lied. Why I couldn't stop. Why it felt easier to fake flights than face the truth. He drew a long breath. I used to swear I'd never end up like my dad. You know that story. Evelyn told you. When I started betting during lockdown, I convinced myself it was different. Controlled. Temporary. A way to feel movement when everything was still. But every loss echoed him. And every lie was me pretending not to hear it. His eyes were glassy, but dry. I told myself I was protecting you, that if I fixed it fast enough, you'd never know. But the longer I hid it, the more I needed the lie to feel real. It wasn't about winning anymore. It was about keeping the silence intact. I let him talk. There's mercy in letting someone finish their confession without interruption. When he finally stopped, I asked the question that had lived behind my teeth for months. Why come here today? He looked at his hands. Because you could have destroyed me. You could have pressed charges, told everyone what I did, made sure I lost everything. But you didn't, and I've been trying to understand why. I took a long breath before answering. Because I didn't need revenge, Marco. I needed distance. He nodded, slowly, like the words hurt going in. I get that now. Then he said something I wasn't ready for. I thought the worst thing you'd ever find was another woman, he said. But the worst thing you found was a man you couldn't trust with silence. The sentence landed like a stone in a still pond. No splash, just ripples I'd feel for days. He told me about the GA meetings, about his sponsor, about the part-time job at the nonprofit that paid enough to keep him afloat, but not enough to tempt relapse. It's small, but honest, he said. Every paycheck clears. Every bill's mine. He said he was making payments on his debts, a few hundred a month at a time. It'll take years, he admitted, but I'm finally okay with slow. When he finished, he sat there waiting. Not for forgiveness exactly, but for proof he hadn't wasted my time. I'm glad you're getting help, I said. Truly, I hope you find peace. He gave a small, lopsided smile. You already did, didn't you? I didn't answer. Some truths don't need to be spoken to be obvious. He stood, nodded once, a gesture both farewell and apology. At the door, he turned. You were always the steady one. I used to think that made you boring. Now I know it made you safe. When the door closed, it didn't echo the way it used to. That night, I took the folder from the counter and slid the truck title into my filing cabinet. Then, without quite knowing why, I opened my old spreadsheet. Tab. Lessons. Updated. Love without trust is a loan without collateral. Honesty checks are not paranoia. They're maintenance. You can mourn someone who's still alive. Distance is not punishment, it's oxygen. Survival isn't strength, it's clarity. I saved the file, turned off the laptop, and sat in the dark for a while. The air handler clicked on, steady and clean. For the first time, I didn't need the noise to fill the silence. I could trust it. Sometimes I still think about Marco. Not the man who lied, but the boy in Evelyn's story, counting coins in a garage, trying to save a house already gone. Maybe we're all just grown versions of that moment, trying to fix something too big with what's left in our hands. But now, when I think of him, it isn't with anger. It's with the kind of quiet pity that feels like letting go. Because the truth is, he wasn't the only one who needed saving. I did too, and I finally did it.